Over the course of the past couple of years, as Netflix has gotten into its own kind of original content, it's been of middling quality. And I honestly thought Slumberland was going to be just like that, but it turns out I was actually wrong, and it's a pretty sweet coming of age story. And let's talk about it right now on Podio Commentary. Hi, my name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to Podio Commentary, where we discuss movies. And there's going to be a lot of movies to discuss in December of 2022 because my challenge is to try to do at least one a day. And thankfully, there's a lot of stuff to watch outside of theatrical, and which is great because when you're in a winter storm like I am right now, it's very difficult for me to get out of the house. But the great thing about that is I get the opportunity to sit down with my kids and watch some movies that I probably would have otherwise not seen. And that's actually what led me to watch Slumberland over on Netflix yesterday. Now, this movie obviously is a Francis Lawrence directed film that is a take on a Little Nemo story. It's something that they've been working on for the last couple of years. And when I first saw the trailer for this movie, my thought was, oh, great, they gender bent Nemo. Certain people in the culture war are going to lose their minds. And yeah, here we go. Thankfully, that hasn't happened. I think because when it comes to the culture war, and you all know who I'm generally talking about, but when it comes to the culture war, a lot of those people don't really pay attention to comic strips that were popular like 100 years ago. They're not really going to care about this because it's not like, a contemporary property. But this movie is one that when I saw the trailer for, I thought that it kind of looked a little bit awkward, having a lot to do with just the general effects. You can see here that there's just a lot of CG, a lot of green screen, and it looks pretty good, but it also does kind of feel cheap and empty and soulless at certain times. And to be fair, this movie, visually speaking, even though it's coming in from director Francis Lawrence, does have a lot of those moments where it feels that way. But what sells it is the performances and the core concept of the coming of age story. So in this particular film, we're dealing with 11-year-old Nemo, a little girl who lives alone with her father at a lighthouse, right? Where he teaches her math and piano and cooking and how to run the lighthouse and how to be self-sufficient, while also somewhat isolating her from the rest of the world. But it's something that she's okay with because in her mind, all she needs is her dad. And I get that. And I respect that. I got 2 kids myself. I've talked about that a lot here in these reviews. And so when she has a dream after being told the story about her dad, who I actually do believe is named Nemo. That's my personal take on it. They don't actually give the dad a name, but it kind of feels that like it might be Nemo, and this is just Nemo Jr. We just never get that distinction. Of course, that just might be my own headcanon, like I said, but still, that's kind of how I was rolling with it while watching it last night. But he tells her the story about when he was a kid and he would go on adventures with his friend Flip, the outlaw, and that they went to the Sea of Nightmares to try to find pearls that were down to the very bottom of everything, right? The very bottom of the sea. And then a big monster comes and grabs him. And then while she's dreaming that night, he has to go out and save a rescued fisherman. And he ends up going out and getting swallowed by the sea. And she has a dream about that. She wakes up, he's gone, and she ends up having to go live with her uncle, who is estranged from the brother, who is played wonderfully by Chris O'Dowd, who surprisingly loses his Irish accent for this particular movie, which I get why they did it, but I like his accents. I was like really hoping he was gonna, pull out some of the funny, but no, he turns in a very good, nuanced performance of a man who is also very much just afraid of his own life. And he's kind of boxed himself away in his apartment where he sells doorknobs. And ultimately, he's trying to connect with Nemo. He doesn't know how to do it. She's rejecting him. But when she goes to sleep, she finds herself in Slumberland where she meets up with Jason Momoa's Flip. And he basically says, listen, if you can get your hands on this map, we can go find these pearls and you can wish to see your dad every night in your dreams. And the two embark on this journey through this is where it gets weird. Okay, so they go into Slumberland, which is pretty cool. And again, every person has their dream. It's a kind of a reoccurring dream. There's not a lot of variety, if you will. Like they go from her lighthouse dream into a woman who has a dream about being like a salsa dancer. And then from there, they go into like that of like a 7-year-old kid driving a trash truck and kind of destroying the city, although he's got a lot of tats, which I thought was really funny. And then they go into like a businessman, like a zoot suit guy from the 1920s. And then it's just like they go into all of these different dreams that are just kind of, oh yeah. And then the Canadian goose guy, but that's a whole other thing. But all these dreams are kind of daisy chained together. And every time she goes to sleep, the other people are asleep magically at that moment in time as well, which I think is just a little bit kind of ridiculous. Like it should be multiple different dreams, allowing them to navigate their way through, and they can just kind of pick up where they leave off. Because again, this is all in her subconscious, right? Supposedly. However, through the process of this, they're being chased by the cops, basically like the Slumberland PD, more or less, because Flip has been an outlaw for 28 years in Slumberland, and he's always been one step ahead of the cops. But now that he's got Nemo, they seem to be tracking them down a lot more often. And of course, like the two of them bond, and they find out that Flip is really the dream personification of the brother who got left behind in Slumberland when the dad ended up meeting the mom and separating out and kind of going off on his own adventures and leaving the brother behind. And that was the brother's trauma that he was dealing with. He felt isolated and alienated and left alone. And because of that, he stopped just engaging with his older brother. But then his brother dies. So there's regret. And now he's raising Nemo and he's like, I got to make this work. And he actually tries. That's the thing that I think is really, really, really sweet about this movie, is the fact that the uncle is not like the evil uncle. He's not the evil stepbrother or the stepmother. He's not evil or mean. He just is like, I'm a guy who's been on my own for years, and I'm just going to, be here doing this thing. And then he's got to figure out how to connect and how to be with this 11-year-old. And so he's trying to connect with her, and she doesn't want to connect with him because she wants to find her dad. And of course, as she goes through it, you come to realize that like the dream police for Slumberland, they give you the dream that you need to get through what you're dealing with right then. And that, of course, is the metaphor for how Nemo is going to be handling this entire situation. So ultimately, they get the pearls. And as the monster, her nightmare is grabbing Flip to take him away, she frees Flip, therefore freeing Philip, her uncle, from having no dreams, right? And allowing him to kind of recapture his childhood and recapture his essence and his adventurous spirit. And what I enjoyed about that moment was, like, in the moment when she does that, she's knocked out cold in a ship, in a little dinghy that's about ready to be, she's about ready to be pulled into the water. And then he immediately dives in, saves her, and, everything else. It's just kind of like, okay, fine. And then she gets to her place. She spends time with her dad, like one more day with her dad, but then comes to realize that she needs Philip and Philip needs her, and they need each other. And that's the world. And that's the reality. To which case then, before it's over, the cop is like, yeah, you get it. You get the dream you need, which makes me really question if everything that they were doing in this movie was just a way for her to kind of rumble around in her subconscious in order to get to the point where she could face her monster, face the nightmare, face her loss, say goodbye to her dad, and then accept where things are and go on from there. There's a lot of nuance in the movie. There's a lot of little elements in it that I quite enjoyed. But for me, ultimately, as I'm watching this thing, I think to myself, like, yeah, like Francis Lawrence did a good job. The script's pretty decent. My only real complaint is just the overabundance on green screen, because there's times where it works, and then there's times where it just looks cheap. And the whole issue with like the daisy chaining of dreams, which, look, I get why they did it like that. I completely understand why that's a thing, but it just feels kind of like, okay, this could have been done like in a night rather than like a whole little subplot of her like using her uncle's phone to say that she's out of school for like 2 weeks so she can go sleep in the boiler room during the day in order to go back on the journey. That was a little bit weird, but whatever. It was like the never ending story from back in the 80s kind of felt like it would rock itself kind of similar on that one. Every time Bastian wanted to dive back in to the story, he would have to run off somewhere and start reading again in order to go back into that world. So I totally understand that. I totally get that. I think one of the funniest things about the movie was like Jason Momoa was great in the role as Flip, but he kept asking everybody if they party. It's like, you party? You're like, yeah, you party. And it's just been this thing where it's like, if someone asks you if you party, there's usually a pretty solid indication of what that is. They don't ever elaborate on what it is, but I think that line is traditionally for like adults to kind of get what he's aiming at. But when he asks it to the 7-year-old driving the garbage truck, that made me just bust up laughing. I thought that was really good. This is one that my kids really liked, I really liked, and I would actually watch this again with them. I wouldn't have any problem doing that. So if you've seen Slumberland, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Let me know. And if you have a suggestion for me to watch a movie this month and review it here on the channel, let me know down in the comments. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you again, and peace out.